Peace and blessings. You are here for another episode of the Black on Black Education Podcast. Eva couldn't make it with us tonight, so it's just going to be me and my man. Actually, we always let our guests introduce themselves. So, Kwame, well, too late. Tell us who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Yes. Peace, everybody. Black on Black Ed audience. My name is Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, and I am a 15-year educator. I've taught in Philadelphia, in Boston, primarily as a middle school math teacher. And over the past couple of years, I've transitioned into educational consulting and started my own firm, Identity Talk Consulting, which specializes in providing professional development and consulting services to K-12 educators, individual schools, colleges, universities, and other educational nonprofit organizations. And Identity Talk has, over the past couple years, has expanded into more of a multimedia enterprise where, we do podcasting. We also provide some content through social media outlets like Instagram, like Facebook. And, we're all about not only building the capacity of educators, but helping educators stay true to the teacher and you, which is our motto. So being true to their identities, being true to their principles, being true to their morals as educators, and creating a path that informs their vision of what it means to be an educator and what education should look like in their point of view.
That's interesting, man, and seemingly extremely important in the moment. In this moment, we have all kind of laws being written to stop teachers from teaching a whole variety of subjects, which I can imagine it does the opposite of what you just described. So a teacher wants to, come in as their authentic self, and they got to worry about all of these rules associated with what they can and cannot say or can and cannot do. Let's talk a little bit about that and how the work that you do would kind of suggest to teachers what they should be doing to kind of assuage some of the concerns they have around quote unquote getting in trouble.
Sure. And I'll use my story as an example. So when I first got into teaching,
I'm listening, but I'll be right back. Go ahead.
All right, no problem. When I first got into teaching, I got into it with the mindset of being a role model, particularly for Black boys in schools, because early on, right after I finished my undergraduate degree at Temple University, I actually did a 2-year term with an organization called Education Works, which is under the umbrella of AmeriCorps. So I was working as a school corps member at one of the nearby schools near Temple University. And it was a K-8 school. And I was there pretty much 50 hours a week, helping out the teachers, leading socialized recess, doing lunch duty, all the dirty work that teachers don't want to do outside of instruction, right? That was pretty much what I was doing. And what I observed in that school was that it was 90% Black and Latinx, but then conversely, 90% of the staff were white teachers. And it was mind-boggling to me because it's like, how's it that there's so few teachers who look like the students? And the white teachers who were teaching the students, some of them were pretty good, but there were some who were very problematic in how they were interacting with them. And I always told myself, if I was in their position, I know that I can make more of an impact and show these students a different way. And that's what ultimately led me to want to get into education, because I just thought, well, why should students, particularly Black students, only aspire to be athletes and entertainers? How about we get them to aspire to be mathematicians, engineers, businessmen, businesswomen, professions that they're not always exposed to at those particular ages, right?
Right.
And that's really what, push me in that direction. So when I think about my role as a Black educator, I look at myself as a counter narrative, because the narrative about Black people, particularly Black males, is that we're dangerous, we're angry, um, we're threatening, all these negative narratives that are attached to us. And what I want to show students is that you can be authentic, you can look like how I look with locks, you know, and be a teacher. I can look just like you
Right.
and be a teacher who's respected, who's educated, and still got swag as well. And that was really something that I wanted to convey as a message. So when I look at what's happening with all this anti-critical race theory legislation, whatever you want to call it, the ban book laws, um, even laws that are focused on transgender folks, um, anti-LGBTQ plus laws, any law that goes against the humanization of our children, I always think of it as, well, like just my role. I feel like my role is to humanize the students, particularly those who look like me, because there's so many narratives out there that do otherwise. And I think, now more than ever, with all this legislation, being pushed through different state legislatures, we have a bigger role than ever to, let students know that, hey, it's okay to be you. It's okay to show up as yourself unapologetically, without consequence. It's okay to rock your crown. It's okay to talk your slang. It's okay to come with your J's on, not just as a student, but as a teacher as well. It's okay to go against the grain, to go against status quo, to be authentic in everything that you do, and how you present yourself, and how you speak, and how you interact. And I think, looking at these laws, it does a total opposite, which is why we have to continue to combat these laws with a fierceness that we've never done it before. So that's really my quick take on it, but I could definitely go deeper into that.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot, and everything that you said is true. And I obviously think about these things. I'm a school board member. We have not had to wrestle with some of the um challenging audience members and things to that effect yet. But you never know. When it comes, and I try to prepare myself in a way where one of the things about me is that I really do try to see both sides of everything. You know what I mean? I sit back and I try to understand why people feel the way that they feel, and I recognize that a large part of it is ignorance. But I also do recognize that sometimes there's a there. So I oftentimes try to invite the people who I tend to agree with on most things to kind of dig in and ask themselves, what pieces here, while we're fighting, what pieces here, where do they have a point? And I try to always pay attention to that. So let me ask you, is there anywhere in these conversations where what these people who are doing some of these things that we obviously consider crazy, where they actually have a point?
I actually think there is, right? If we're going to be reasonable. And I'll give an example.
You got to
So
be reasonable.
there's been a lot of talk about um, these laws, particularly in Indiana, and now in Georgia, where teachers are now required to post up their lesson plans and other instruction materials for the entire school year. So for those who are not teachers and have never been in a classroom before, let me explain to you what that actually means, right? Number one, when you tell a teacher to post lesson plans for an entire year, keep in mind that lesson plans are always subject to change depending on the makeup of your class, the demographics of your class, culturally, socioeconomically, and a bunch of other factors that do matter, right? Because our students come as their intersectional selves. So you have to shape your lessons and your instruction to mirror the students that are in front of you. So that's important. But as a parent, right, it's nice to know what your children are learning. So I do believe in transparency for parents within reason, right? So if you want to know what I'm teaching your child in school, I'm more than happy to provide you with an overview of topics that we're going to cover, right? It's similar to when we were in college when and you had to you get a syllabus at the beginning of the semester that gives an overview of everything that you're going to learn week to week. But you also know that it can change depending on certain things that happen. Maybe school gets canceled for a full week, or the professor is out because of an emergency. Things happen over the course of a semester or a school year. But you at least have an idea, an overview of what you're going to learn and what's going to be taught. Now, is the professor giving you a day to day of what you're going to learn in each class? No, because they know that if a student doesn't understand a particular part of the lesson, you may have to spend the next class having to revise that lesson and make some adjustments so that that student or a group of students can understand what they need to know,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I believe that parents should be aware of what's going on, but I also believe that parents should be proactive in finding out that as well. But there's a way you go about doing it that still shows respect
Right.
to the professionalism of teachers.
Right. And
Ha-
I think
yeah.
people have lost, a whole bunch of that. And it's my sincere hope that we get it back. You know what I mean? It's teachers, they work very, very hard. They try to have their summer off, asking people to spend damn near the whole summer writing up a full year lesson plans is just, it's not a reasonable request.
Right.
And what I don't think that they recognize is just how much teachers are on the brink. Like right now, that teachers are I talk to people ready, like people are ready to snap. You know what I mean? And we've already dealt with this, kind of great resignation everybody is talking about in terms of workers in the United States of America. But we can focus in on what the great resignation of teachers looks like. That's already happening too. And there's a teacher shortage in lots of places across the country, and that teacher shortage can get worse. Like I don't know. I don't think that they understand the fragility of the overall system and the threads with which it's holding together. If you got 20% of the teachers who get up and walk out, then you're gonna have other places where they're like, okay, yeah, bus driver can be the substitute. We'll get the janitor to come and help teach classes.
Or the National Guard.
Just completely unreasonable. So talk about that. Talk about the teachers that you communicate with. I know you're doing professional development. What are you hearing from them about their desire to stay in the classroom or leave the classroom? And if they leave, where they're going?
Well, Jamal's a mixed bag, brother. But here's one thing that's been common in the different responses I've heard from teachers is that they still love teaching. They love this work. They don't love the politics associated with the work, but they love the work. That is being able to be in position to positively impact the lives of their students. They love that part. And if given a choice, they will love to do it in a way that not only humanizes them, but also their students. That's really what it is. The problem is, given how things are, especially with the complications of the pandemic, you have teachers who are forced to make some difficult decisions because they realize that they're trying to do what's best for their students at the expense of their mental health, at the expense of their social emotional wellness.
Right.
And we all know that if you don't have a full cup, you just can't operate. You can't operate, out of an empty cup. You just can't. And you need the space to recharge that battery of yours. So I feel like you have some teachers who want to stick it out because they just want to be there for the students during this difficult time. I mean, if this is what you've done for 10, 15 years, maybe this is something that you've always wanted to do and you finally have the chance to do it, right? How would you feel leaving your students behind,
Right.
knowing all the things that are going on with COVID, knowing that there are a lot of schools who are having a difficult time trying to get subs to come into their buildings. Like we're struggling to get subs in our schools, Jamal. That's how bad it is with this pandemic. So knowing that as a classroom teacher, you don't want to put your students in a position where they're not going to get any kind of learning or consistent learning throughout the year. So there's a guilt that's attached to it. You don't want to feel guilty. You don't want to feel like you've let your students down. And that's why some teachers overstay their welcome in the classrooms, because they don't want to have to deal with that guilt. But at the same time, you have some teachers who are just like, I love these kids, but guess what? I love myself a little bit more.
Right.
So if I'm gonna get fired for teaching what I know is right for my students, if I'm gonna get fired for speaking out about just the inhumane acts that are taking place, then guess what? I'm gonna get fired then. If I have to quit just so that I'll be able to live a normal life, a normal, healthy life, then that's what I need to do. I'm at to sacrifice what I love in order to do this,
Right.
in order to be there for my family, in order to be there for my children. Because a lot of the teachers are also mothers, they're also fathers, they're husbands, they're wives, they're guardians to other loved ones. They have other roles that they have outside of the classroom.
Right.
And they're not able to fulfill them because of the stresses and the trials and tribulations that are associated with this work.
Right.
So even though you have teachers in different situations, the common denominator is that they love teaching. They still love the kids.
Right.
That's undeniable. But it's really a difference of how much they love themselves. Do you
Right.
love yourself enough to leave this profession that you have dedicated your life to so dearly in order to save yourself?
Right. And you hit on a couple points there. We in talking to teachers, I think the 80-20 rule, is true here. When I hear people complain about what's going on, 80% of the complaints are about the school, the overall system, the fact that they have to teach to the test. 20% is about the students. There's some kids out there who's they act bad. They're not bad kids, but you know what I mean. Where there's bad behavior, they're acting out and things to that effect.
Sure.
Particularly at this point in time when they don't know how to handle all of the emotions that are going on. And most places don't have the proper social and emotional, learning capacity to help students deal with the challenges of what are currently, unprecedented times. So most of the complaints, though, are about the infrastructure around them that's set up, and not the little young people that are in front of them. And that should not be the case. You shouldn't have to go to school on a day-to-day basis and fight your organization in order to then still have enough energy to bring all you can to the little pieces, to the little folks in front of you. 80% of your focus in terms of challenging of finding opportunities in the challenge should be directed at finding the opportunities for each of our students. And I certainly, I know teachers are trying. I know they're trying. So in your personal professional development work, how do you help teachers, grapple with that? What are the things that you provide or communicate to them around how to deal with infrastructure challenges at their kind of administrative levels?
I don't know if there's one right answer for how to deal with all those things. I think fundamentally it has to start with you taking care of you and understanding that you don't have the capacity to save an entire school. You just can't do it. All you can do is go into your classroom every single day and do the best that you absolutely can. That is all you're required to do. And even if your best isn't that great these days for understandable reasons, you have to be okay with that. You just gotta be okay with that, right? But it's really all about effort. It's not about being perfect in your practice, because right now there are a lot of teachers who are not perfect in their practice. There are a lot of teachers who don't feel like they're doing their best teaching right now because of everything we've discussed. And they've come to terms with that. But are they beating themselves up for that? No. Because they know realistically that they can't possibly be their best selves if they deal with all these pressures coming from different directions, whether it's from politicians, whether it's from parents, whether it's from maybe some of their school leaders. So at this time, it's not even so much about instructional practices. Like, I can't talk to them about instructional practices because I don't think that's the priority at this stage. The priority should be focused more on social emotional learning, health and wellness. Because as much as we talk about how important it is to give that to students, teachers, and I'm even going to throw in school leaders, need that as well. Because if we can't even prioritize those two things, how can we possibly be in position to build our capacities as practitioners, as instructors, as facilitators to our students? There's no way if we're not fully okay in here.
And the interesting thing about that, and the reason why I love the idea, that is because it almost changes the nature of school. Like, if you decide that social and emotional wellness, which really is like, it should come before academics, because you can't really get to academic. One of the reasons why you can't get some people to focus in on academics is because they're not okay. They don't feel good. Their minds don't feel good. Their heart doesn't feel good. They feel sick by what's going on at home, by what's going on in the world. Like, they're hurting. And so if you don't address that first, then you don't get to academics. So if we say, okay, this social emotional learning and wellness are the areas that we need to sort of focus on, that can become an intergenerational conversation. Yes. That can become a thing where students are talking about what they need to do, teachers are talking about what they need to do, administration's talking about what they need to do, and now you got this virtuous cycle of upward feelings, for lack of a better term. Everybody's getting better together, which will allow you to focus in a whole bunch more on academics. Do you see that happening anywhere? Are there examples of people doing that right?
So I'm going to answer your question, but I also want to take this opportunity to bridge two ideas together, right?
Okay.
So when we talk about social emotional learning, we need to unpack what that actually is, because that term has been weaponized. And what I mean by that, well, if you know, Sister Dina Simmons, she talks about social emotional learning as being presented as white supremacy with a hug. Now, why does she say that? Because when you look at how it's being um, communicated to educators, how it's being done with students, it's being done without that anti-racist, anti-bias lens. And here's a perfect example of what that is. You have teachers who are talking about social emotional learning, but they're also okay with these anti-CRT laws that are banning books that actually address the social emotional wellness of those students, particularly um, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian Pacific Islander students, other students of color. You can't advocate for social emotional learning if you are for this dehumanizing legislation. That's just, I mean, that's just number one. Um, so we really need to unpack what that is, because if you ask different educators what they think social emotional learning is, I'm pretty sure you're not going to get the same answer every time. You're going to get some very different answers. So I think it's important for us to really be specific about what that is, and how we need to um position that within the context of anti-racism. That has to happen.
Yeah, and this is where I honestly, I start to be like, I don't know. I just I get to a place where I don't know the answer, because on one hand, I'm gonna tend to agree with Dina Simmons about a bunch, and I'm gonna agree with you about a bunch. But there's going to be people within the school community that are going to vehemently disagree, and so it's when what do they say, when the immovable force meets the irresistible. Yeah, I forgot what it is, but it's when two things come together and neither one of them doesn't want to give.
Yeah.
And so I try to figure out what is supposed to look like, when because if you piss off half the school population, no matter who the half is, everybody's going to suffer as a result of it. I wish that we could have much more. Something I say all the time, and I don't think I've said it on the podcast in a while. We don't have to be like minded. In this world, when we're not going to always be like minded, but we got to find ways to be like hearted. If really what we all want is for the well being of all of our students, for if we the white kids, the black kids, the Asians, like I want to pick everybody up, for as a company. We do have a specific focus on the black students. There's a different need. There's a higher need, but all the other students are there, and everybody's important as well. And so when dealing with their parents and what their parents are going to come and kind of bring to the school system, everything breaks down if we can't find a way to have a conversation. And I don't even use the term CRT, because the reality is nobody was teaching CRT.
Nobody.
There's some examples, to the left spectrum, where I have heard some things where I'm like, maybe that's not an appropriate way to teach people. Maybe that is making people feel bad. Not that that's not something that should happen in school. But maybe there are some challenges, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like
No.
it's what specific segment of people have tried to do is tie everything that has to do with anything to do with race into CRT and chuck it all, out. And that it's not reasonable. And I guess maybe I got to have one of them on the podcast at some point, and try to have a again, like, take a deep breath, breathe out, and try not to get my emotions flaring around it, so I can stay level headed in a way to say no, that's just not reasonable. No, that's just not true. That's not how it is. Let's talk about that. But yeah, what do you have? I thought, like I said, I'm almost at a loss. What do you feel like the solution is, with the understanding that this solution, it can't just be something that you and I are going to agree with. It has to be something that at least a little bit, is going to pull the other side of this conflict into the conversation.
Man, I think you kind of answered the question. You said that we need for all of us to be like-hearted, right? So if it's truly about students, if it's truly about children, then why should we concern about power?
Right.
You have to understand, all these things that we're mentioning here are power moves. It's all about the preservation of power.
Right.
And if you think about it, as a teacher, like many other teachers out here who think like I think, who think like you think, we are advocating so strongly, not because that we're trying to gain power, but because we're trying to speak up for our students.
Right.
We know this is right for our students, and there is data that backs it up. So I think if we're really going to be truly about students, then it shouldn't matter whether I'm right or you're wrong. It's about being on that same mission to humanize students. And if that's truly what the goal is, then there shouldn't be any debates about CRT.
Right. Right.
There should not be any debates about CRT. There shouldn't be any debates about how we go about doing social emotional learning. Like, we shouldn't be having these arguments that are not only erroneous, but are irresponsible.
Right.
And a lot of these people who are pushing these narratives are people who are not even scholars of critical race theory. I'm not a scholar of critical race theory. I've just been fortunate to speak with a lot of qualified scholars who have studied this theory for many, many years and have the receipts to prove it. And it's the same scholars that you talk to, Jamal, because, it's all in the same circle. So I think education is definitely key. You can't dispute facts. You don't want to listen to me? Well, guess what? You're going to have to listen to this data that validates what I'm saying.
Right.
All right? Because there are many scholars who are doing some excellent work around these issues. So we got to listen to them, and we got to look at the research to see what they've been able to uncover with this thing.
Right.
But I don't know if we'll ever get to a place where we'll come to a consensus. And this goes beyond, right wing and left wing, Democrat versus Republican, liberal versus conservative. It goes beyond those political realms. Fundamentally, this is about humanity.
Right.
All these, this is the Black on Black Education podcast. The things that we are advocating for Black children are the same things that will benefit all other children. If you think about it, we're not saying anything that's magical or out of the ordinary. We're stressing the Black part because we know that Black children aren't getting those things. So I don't know if I answered your question, brother, but
you did. You did. It's the reality is that we're not going to come to a consensus. And again, we don't always have to. We don't have to of minds have to come up with the same thing, but people just need to be a lot more reasonable than some are in the scope of the conversation, and I'll continue to try to get better at navigating said conversation. Yeah, I've debated it with with folks before, and I won't say that I've changed minds, where all of a sudden it's just like, okay, I believe what you believe. But I think that I've certainly had communication with people where they said, I hadn't necessarily looked at it exactly that way before, and that's that's the start of the process. If you can get somebody to say, okay, I haven't really looked at it like that before, then they can say, oh, wow, yeah, okay. You can start to kind of move in the direction, and I think the mistake sometimes what people make is that they're gonna be, it's like, I want to snap my fingers and have you believe what I believe, and nobody's ever gonna do that, for any side of any argument, almost ever. It just doesn't work that way. So,
Oh no, man,
yeah,
not at all. And Chris Paul likes to say this quote a lot. I can show you better than I can tell you. I can show you better than I can tell you.
right,
If you don't believe what's coming out of my mouth, let me just model how this works.
right,
And once you see the results, you can't say anything to me at this point. Look what's happening.
right, right. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I don't want us to go without talking about a subject that Black on Black education is kind of positing to. We're launching our nonprofit. We're focusing our attention on student centered approaches to education, and we really do want to find out what that looks like. So I don't even want to give you anymore. Like when you hear student centered learning, what does that mean to you? What does that look like to you?
And student centered learning means that students have to play an active role in the learning process. Simply put, what does that look like? It looks like restorative practices, right? So there are a lot of people out there who are doing some phenomenal work around restorative justice, how to incorporate restorative practices when it comes to student discipline, when it comes to just having healthy interactions with students in the classroom. That's one. We also mentioned social emotional learning, being able to have a pulse in the classroom to say, hey, I see that we're not quite present in this lesson. Let me pause the lesson so I can tap in with y'all to see what's going on. Let's have a conversation. Let me know what's going on with y'all that's preventing you from being your best right now. Because we can't get back to the learning if we don't address this. But yeah, some folks who will keep on pushing through the lesson and they won't even, mind the signs. They'll disregard the signs that the students are presenting to us. So social emotional learning, restorative practices, but really just letting students know that as a teacher, you don't have all the answers. Like Ye said, like, you ain't got the answers. Right? No, but seriously, we don't have all the answers as teachers. We are imperfect, just like you are. We make mistakes. And if we make a mistake, we acknowledge it publicly to y'all so you can see that, hey, it's okay to make mistakes too.
Right.
Right? So understanding that as a leader of the classroom, I need to put my students in a position to lead, to share ideas, to share different ways in which we can improve the classroom experience for all. And that requires mutual accountability.
Right.
Just like I have to hold students accountable for being their best selves academically and behaviorally. They too need to hold me accountable for being the best practitioner, the best instructor, and the best nurturer that I need to be for them.
Right.
They need to call me to task respectfully
Right.
if I'm not meeting their expectations.
Right.
Just like I have to, call on them when they're not meeting their expectations as learners. So it has to be a two-way street.
Right.
So those are just a few things that come to mind when I think about student-centered learning. And another thing too, when you do put together a lesson, are you putting together a lesson in a way that makes it easy for you to teach? Or are you putting the lesson together that accounts for how students will be able to access your content?
Right.
Are you keeping in mind how students learn, how students process information? If you have students with IEPs and 504 plans, are you making sure that you're putting in the necessary modifications, scaffolds, and accommodations so that they too can access your curriculum? That's student centered.
Right.
You're not just teaching from a book because it's easy to do it,
Right.
and that's what's convenient for you.
Right.
You're doing whatever is necessary to ensure that the student is in the best position to thrive and be their best selves. So
Right.
that's what I think in a nutshell.
I got you. And I agree with everything you're saying. And I think a lot of what you're saying is, from the perspective of somebody who's been in the classroom. And I haven't been in the classroom. I have this, the way that I think it ultimately should be, like a utopian feeling of what it should be like, where, their kids arrive in the building, and, when they want, kind of, but they get there when they want to, but they want to be there because they're working on projects that are so freaking fun and exciting to them that they wouldn't dare, miss out on that, the same way they might not want to miss out on, the some show on television or whatever the case may be, or something on YouTube. So where they're engaged in a project, and I see the walls of the school, kind of falling down, and the walls of the classroom falling down, and the walls of grades, and ABCD grades, and first, second, third, fourth grades. I'm talking about a classroom where people arrive and they work together in conjunction with the teachers. You talked kind of about that learning process where the teachers have to learn, where the teachers also have to unlearn. Students have to learn and unlearn, and entering into a process where they do that together all day, and work on projects that are focused in on how we go about the business of actually bettering our communities, like, full stop.
Right.
That's what education is about. It's how do I turn on the fire and flame inside of a young human being, so that they can look out and say, "Wow, I see a challenge." I just posted something on Instagram today, with Sharif El Mekki. He's like, I don't ask kids what do they want to do when they grow up. I ask them what problems they want to solve. So finding out what problems children want to solve, and having maybe not every academic. I don't know. I think there's obviously some boxes that you got to check, and some things that you have to do, that are like the traditional and standard curriculum. But I think it's probably 80-20. I think probably 80% of it you can chuck, keep 20%, and let that other 80% all focus in on what are we doing to better our communities? What are we doing to better the world? And putting students on a process where they can critically think about that, where they can collaborate with one another about that,
Yes.
and where they can focus all of their power on growing and developing their capacity to answer that question. And that's how we solve the problems in the world. When we have more little people that we have grown and developed to solve problems, versus to retain information that if you give them a test in June and they get a 90 on it, if you give it to them again in September, they'll fail it. Which has been proven over and over and over again that this is what happens. They're just moving around in a social structure that we created because we said this is the way that it's artificial, and it has to stop. So I'm gonna get off the soapbox because I could keep going. Like, you know, when I talk about like how I feel about it from the utopia perspective, but I know that there's practical things that have to be done on a day-to-day basis to ever get, you know, to this. You know, you're not gonna rip the whole thing apart, but hopefully we are able to be a part of creating spaces that take a lot of this into consideration and move, you know, bridge from where we are today to this type of world as fast as possible, because I think the world needs it. I think these students need it, and the teachers. Imagine how much more exciting and engaging that process would be for the teachers that we're talking about are ready to leave the classroom.
Man, Jamal, I'm with you, brother. You saying a lot. But before I add on to what you're saying, shout out to Sarfo-Mensah. Shout out to the Center for Black Educator Development out in Philly. They're doing phenomenal work.
True story.
Sharif, if you're listening, you got to come on my podcast, brother. We got to have a conversation. So quick plug in there. But what you mentioned, like when Sharif asks his students, what problems do you want to solve? That is an example of student-centered learning or a student-centered approach.
Excuse me.
Imagine if we were to shape our curriculum around the problems that students want to solve, as opposed to problems that we deem as important based on our perspectives. Education will be in a much better place if we just allowed our students in, if we listen to our students more. The problem is we have a system in place where we are holding allegiance to protocols, rules, and guidelines that are counterproductive to humanity.
Right.
Whether you want to talk about the way we do standardized testing, the fact that they're still culturally biased, that's not humanizing students. And that's definitely not student-centered. The test scores that we get from those standardized tests are not for students. Let's keep it real.
Facts.
It's just a way for not even districts, but just a way for people to arbitrarily evaluate how effective educators are. And that's a whole nother conversation. We're not gonna, open a can of worms, but ultimately, if we just listen to our students more, if we let them in on the process and said, hey, I don't need to be in the front. I'm okay being in the back and letting my students lead. Ultimately, that's what education is about. It's not about feeding them information. And this is what Paulo Freire talks about in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, this idea of banking. These students aren't coming in as empty vessels that need to be fed knowledge, right? They already come in with knowledge. They already come in as assets. Our job is to help students recognize that they are assets. Our job is to affirm them and let them know that they are already powerful as they are. We just have to guide them in utilizing their power in a way that's going to impact society.
Right.
That's our job. Because if we want to talk about indoctrination, the way K-12 education is set up and has been set up for years is a form of indoctrination. Let's just keep it real.
Facts. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, man. I mean, we obviously could go on and on. But before we get out of here, just make sure tell people, a little bit about, Identity Talk, exactly like where they can find you, who should be reaching out when, you know what I mean? We've obviously had a whole bunch of time to talk. You've been at the conference. We've been on your podcast. I know that teachers and districts can stand to have you come out and talk. Just talk a little bit about the services you provide and how people can get in touch.
Yes, for sure. So Identity Talk Consulting, as I mentioned in the very beginning, we specialize in providing professional development and consulting services to K-12 school districts and individual educators. And we focus on a myriad of things, primarily um, culturally responsive practices and anti-racist practices. We focus on curriculum development. We focus on just school culture and particularly any specific needs that our clients want addressed. So we're really into responding to the needs of the client. But at the end of the day, the goal is to make schools and more importantly, educators better at what they do by helping them understand who they are identity wise as educators within that space. Because once you understand who you are, once you understand what your principles are, your morals, your non negotiables, all those different things, you'll be able to walk in your greatness. You'll be able to walk unapologetically as your authentic self. And that's ultimately what the goal is with Identity Talk Consulting. So as far as how you can connect with us, you can connect with us at our website, identitytalk4educators.com. You'll be able to find the services we provide. We also provide some online courses where you can get accreditation, particularly if you live in the state of Massachusetts. So Identity Talk Consulting is an accredited K-12 professional development provider for Massachusetts educators. But even if you don't live in the state of Massachusetts, you can still get accreditation and get some credits for the online course we provide. So make sure you check us out there. As far as our multimedia content, you can actually see me every Tuesday on Instagram. I do a IG live show called Walk That Talk, where we focus on the activation of liberatory knowledge. So that's what that talk stands for. So if you're an educator that's about that life, if you're an educator that's about liberating students and unlocking their potential and creating a world for them that's going to allow them to matter, that's going to be the space for you every Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you check us out on Instagram. And then, of course, we have our Identity Talk for Educators live podcast, which we're currently doing bi-weekly because this year I introduced an additional podcast called Radical Math Talk, which is specially made for educators, math educators who are justice centered and are about social justice and liberation for their students within the math classroom. So we have a lot going on, as you can see. You can check both those podcasts out every week on all platforms. And then the last thing would be we started a Patreon. So you can find me on Patreon. It's Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. And if you're someone that has been following Identity Talk from day one and you really benefit from the content we provide, any monetary donation is going to help to keep that platform going, because as content creators, we spend a lot of time creating this content for the public, and it can be a thankless job, and we don't look for the thank yous, but they're always appreciated. But we also know that the return of investment, is important for us so that we can continue to provide this quality content just like you all do at Black on Black Education. So if you're someone that would like to, donate, whether it's $1, $5, whatever you're able, you can go to Patreon and check out the Identity Talk page through my name, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. So that's how you can connect with Identity Talk.
All right. So the last question always allows comes from our guest. We allow you to ask us any question that you have, and since I'm the only one here today, obviously I'll be answering it. So fire away.
All right, Jamal, man, what can I ask you? What has it been like watching your daughter evolve into such a dope educator? I mean, what has that been like for you as a father? Seeing your daughter do the things that she's been doing, particularly in her, I believe this is her first year?
Second year.
Second year. See, the time's going by so quick.
Yeah.
Second year as an educator, helping you run. I mean, she is.
I'm
the
helping
mother.
her.
She's the mother of this business.
I'm
Let's get it
helping
straight.
her. I'm helping her right there. Don't
she's like the mother of the business. This is her right here.
Right.
And she's still teaching full time. Like, tell me, as a father, how does that feel, bro?
It's definitely surreal, man. Eva is a powerhouse. I am a proud papa, proud girl dad. Like, there are times where we're sitting on the podcast and she'll say something and I get welled up with emotion, at how powerful she is. Like, it's, don't tell her I said so, but she's a better version of me. She some of the things that I didn't do because I didn't go to school, like, her mind is way more structured. Like, she'll follow things. Sometimes I'll be all over the place with stuff and she'll just be like, boom, 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 boom. So she's amazing, and it puts a smile on my face, and I have just sincere gratitude and faith that she's going to do some incredibly amazing things in the overall space of education, and she's going to continue to change people's lives. That she's already changing, young people's lives as a result of the work she does, both in the classroom as well as what we do together on Black and Black Education. So it is. I'm just proud would be the word, followed by grateful.
Yes, and I know, Jamal, you're a humble brother, and you always tell us that you're not in the classroom, you've never been a teacher, but I could tell you this, man, as a teacher who's been in the trenches, you just model what it means to center children. The way you parent is the way that we want teachers, to interact with children. So I just want to say that just your ability to just step back, take a back seat, and let your daughter do her thing, and not be paternalistic and authoritative to where whatever you say goes. It's like, nah, we're a team. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, I'm giving you the space to express yourself and tell me how we can come to a common ground. Like, that's the kind of co-creative process that we need in the classrooms.
Right.
We need for teachers and students to be in that mindset together so that the classroom experience can be further enhanced. And I think you model that through your parenting. So I just want to commend you for that, brother, personally.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate it. It's certainly not always easy, but it's necessary. and I know that it's the right way to go about things. And that we're going to do some powerful things together as a result. If I tried to, run the authoritarian things to that effect, I may be able to get, what I want in particular spots, but it would affect the full body of work and the full the full vision, that we share in terms of what we want to create. So thank you so very much, Kwame, for being on another episode of the podcast, man. We definitely appreciate you. Listen, your school district, y'all need some work. give this man a call. He will come in and hook you guys up and walk you through a process to help teachers better understand their own identities. Same thing for the administration, and that is going to have a significant impact on students, which is what we all look for. So thank you, Kwame, and that's another version of the podcast. Peace. So I'm not going to stop the recording because I'm going to ask you something. I want us to start to do this after. Can you just do a drop, just like, you know what I'm saying, like something, here with the Black on Black education team, something. We want to start to
shout outs.
Yeah, shout out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I was just on the Black on Black education podcast, or really love Eva Jamal, like whatever you kind of feel like, just something that I want to start to collate that with everybody that we work with.
All right. Let's go. So
maybe I should but if I give you the whole screen, oh,
zoom in.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know what? I'll leave it like this, and then I know what's the best way. No, I'll put it like this.
Hey, just zoom in all the way.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, that's cool.
So, actually, you know what? Yes, I'm gonna zoom you in all the way. Go ahead.
Zoom me in all the way. Yep. There we go. So y'all, shout out to the Black on Black education. Eve, I know we miss you tonight, but I love you, and I love what you and your father Jamal are doing with this. I don't know what enterprise. It's an enterprise. And I just love how it's grown over the past couple years. But thank you for what you do for Black children and ultimately all children. And Jamal, man, you got my vote for Father of the Year every single year. Trust. So y'all keep on doing what you're doing. And people, make sure y'all check out the Black on Black podcast. And tap in. They're doing some real work, and they're talking that talk. And that's the kind of change that we need in our education system. So make sure y'all tap in. Black on Black Education Podcast. And let's go.
Go looking out, homie. Definitely appreciate you, man.
For sure, man. For sure.
Have you made it down to New York during your